Welcome to Law Days and Lattes, the podcast where we blend the world of law and business with a warm cup of information and common sense. I'm your host, Sydney Whelan, attorney, real estate investor, and business owner. Each week, we'll be your go-to source for legal insights, business advice, and so much more. Whether you're a seasoned professional, an ambitious entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking guidance, we'll have you covered. From navigating the legal landscape to empowering you with valuable business strategies, we'll explore the legal side of life and enjoy a virtual latte along the way. So, grab your favorite latte, get comfortable, and let's dive into Law Days and Lattes. Welcome to Law Days and Lattes. This podcast is sponsored by the Whelan Law Firm of Moberly, Missouri, your go-to source for legal issues encountered by your family and your business. I'm your host, Sydney Whelan. Welcome to episode number 27 of Law Days and Lattes. Recently, I introduced our listeners to the first of a series of shorter episodes devoted to leading your own businesses and families into the future. Today, we're continuing that conversation. We're going to be talking about real estate. Real estate is a substantial investment, whether it's your first piece of property or your 10th. Let's get back to the basics and best practices to make sure that your investment of time and money is protected. When buying a new home or a new home for your business, there are several legal issues to consider to ensure that the purchase process goes smoothly and your interests are protected. Here are some key legal considerations, starting with the title search and title insurance. The title search ensures that the property has a clear title, meaning no one else has a legal claim to your property. A title search will reveal any liens, encumbrances, or disputes over the property. This is not a do-it-yourself project. If you are dealing with a realtor or a real estate agent, a reputable agent will point you in the right direction to a title company that will run a legal title search on your property. If you are not going through a real estate agent, then please reach out to a lawyer familiar with real estate law in your area and a local title company to get started in the right direction. Title insurance. This protects you from any future claims against the property which may not have been discovered during the title search. Typically, once you find a property and have a signed real estate contract, which we will discuss shortly, the title company will issue a title commitment. The title company runs the title search and agrees or commits to issue title insurance to you upon certain conditions. The conditions depend upon what may or may not have been discovered during the title search. Typical things that may be considered are whether or not all taxes have been paid, whether or not there are existing liens on the property, or whether or not there are existing easements, such as utility easements or driveway easements. There are an infinite number of issues that the title search and title commitment may disclose, so it's very important to read those carefully. Next, let's talk about the purchase agreement or the sales contract. First, we have terms and conditions. Ensure that all terms, including the purchase price, closing date, and any contingencies, like financing or inspection contingencies, are clearly outlined in the contract. And speaking of contingencies, here are some that you may want to consider. Contingencies that allow you to back out of the sale under certain conditions, such as a failed inspection or the inability to secure financing. Remember, all of these terms are negotiable. If it's something that's important to you, make sure it's in the contract. Next, we have the property disclosure statement. The seller's disclosure requires that sellers disclose known issues with the property, such as structural problems or environmental hazards, Review this carefully to avoid future surprises. In the home inspection, make sure you have an inspection contingency clause in your contract. It's always a good idea to include this in your purchase agreement, which allows you to negotiate repairs or even back out of the purchase if significant issues are found. There are a number of inspections that you may want to consider. I think it's a good idea to have a trusted contractor or builder do the inspection for you. You will likely have to pay for their services, but knowing ahead of time if there are any structural issues, plumbing issues, water damage or mold issues, roofing problems, or other issues can prevent costly mistakes or surprises after you purchase the property. Next, check your local zoning and land use laws. Check the zoning laws to ensure that the property can be used as you intended. This is especially important if you plan to make changes or additions to the property, or if you choose to use the property differently than it has been used in the past. For instance, are you planning to use the property in a commercial manner in a residential neighborhood? This might not be allowed. Are you planning to rent it on Airbnb? Sometimes there are local zoning ordinances that prevent that. Be sure to check before you agree to purchase the property. Next, is there a Homeowners Association or an HOA? HOA rules and fees. Every homeowner association has different rules and fees. If the property is part of a homeowners association, be sure to review the HOA's rules, regulations, and fees. These can affect how you use the property and add to your ongoing costs. Next, check easements and restrictions. Beware of any easements, which are rights of others to use parts of your property, or restrictive covenants that may limit how you use the property. Next, we get to financing and mortgage. Understand the terms of your mortgage, including interest rate, repayment schedule, and penalties for early repayment. And remember, in Missouri, your mortgage is called a deed of trust. And that can be different in other states. And while we're talking about financing, if you can, obtain pre-approval for a mortgage to strengthen your offer and streamline the purchasing process. Next is closing. I want to talk with you just a minute about the closing process. First, there are closing costs. I want you to be aware of all closing costs, including legal fees, appraisal fees, and taxes. These can be substantial and should be budgeted for. Make sure you know ahead of time what those expenses are going to be. And the closing documents. Please review all closing documents carefully, including the proposed deed, the loan agreement, and the settlement statement to ensure that it's accurate. If possible, please contact the title company and let them know that you want to review the documents before the actual closing. That gives you plenty of time to catch any mistakes or to be prepared for any unexpected expenses. Next, be aware of property taxes. Understand how your property is assessed for tax purposes and what the current property taxes are. Also be aware that any reassessment could occur after the purchase, and you want to take that into consideration as well. Your county assessor and collector can provide valuable information about the property taxes that you are likely to be assessed on the property once you own it. And speaking of taxes, usually the property taxes for the current year are prorated between the buyer and seller at the time of closing. Be sure to confirm that before closing. Check for any unpaid property taxes that might also become your responsibility after the purchase. This should be a part of the title search that we discussed earlier, but please confirm it before closing. You certainly don't want to assume a large tax bill for someone else's taxes. Next on the list is environmental concerns. Beware of any environmental hazards, such as lead paint, asbestos, or radon that may be present on the property. These may require remediation. Now, this is something that your inspectors can look out for when you have the inspections done prior to the closing. Flood zones. Check if the property is in a flood zone, which could require you to purchase additional flood insurance. In the past, I owned a piece of property in a flood zone. The property was on the banks of a sleepy river meandering through the town. Floods were rare, but not unheard of. On this little lot, it had an old dilapidated house, and at one time, you could see a water line on the walls that was about 3 feet high. Many years have passed, and the old house is no longer there. However, I recently saw an advertisement for the sale of that piece of property. The advertisement mentioned that it was not in the floodplain. Was that misinformation, or has the flood maps changed? I don't know. But as a buyer, please do your due diligence and make sure you understand what you may be getting. Legal representation. Please, please, please consider hiring a real estate attorney to review all documents, ensure compliance with local laws, and protect your interests throughout the transaction. Even a small piece of property can be a substantial investment. Spending a little time and money up front to make sure that your legal interests are protected can save you thousands of dollars down the road. And I want to mention, just briefly, fraud prevention, especially wire fraud. In this day and age, where we are accustomed to doing everything online, be vigilant against wire fraud during the closing process. Always verify wire instructions by calling a known contact at the title company. Be very wary of folks that you do not know. Again, your attorney or your real estate agent can point you to the right direction with title companies and folks that are reputable and trustworthy. Finally, possession date and final walkthrough. Ensure that the possession date is clearly defined in the contract to avoid any disputes about when you can move in. Now, honestly, sometimes those possession dates have to move. Maybe there are issues that come up during the inspection or as part of the process, and you're not able to take possession as planned. But make sure you have that in the contract to avoid any disputes. And make sure you do a final walkthrough. Always conduct the final walkthrough before closing to make sure everything that you've agreed on in the contract is the way it's supposed to be. Being aware of these legal issues and work with qualified professionals such as a real estate agent and attorney. This can help you navigate the home buying process smoothly and avoid potential pitfalls. I especially hope that you take a little bit about what you have learned today and feel more confident when considering your next real estate purchase. I hope you continue to explore ways to take your family and your business into the future. And before you go, I again want to mention our new Law Days and Lattes podcast pages on Facebook and Instagram. This is where you can expect engaging content, valuable tips, and community interaction. Our goal is to create a space where we can learn from each other and grow together. So we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and connect with fellow listeners. We will put all of the links in our show notes. And as a reminder, please like and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a single episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and family. And as always, my friends, grab a cup of coffee or your favorite latte, hold your loved ones tight, and have a great week.
This podcast episode contains general information for discussion purposes only. Each case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Missouri rules generally prohibit lawyers from advertising that they specialize in particular areas of the law. This show should not be construed to suggest such specialization. Nothing on this show should be taken as legal advice for any individual case or situation. This information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship, and the listening or viewing of this podcast does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.